So let's talk about what guilt is. I mean, guilt is a useful emotion when you do something wrong. But I think that our culture, especially women, we're prone to feeling guilt when it's inappropriate,
Oh
right?
my
It's a
gosh.
useful guilt is,
It's
I have a regret. I feel guilty.
yeah.
So it's always helpful to examine if you truly sit with the emotion. Is guilt the right word? Or is it I miss caretaking, right?
Yep.
Or I don't miss caretaking.
Right.
And think about really what is the right word for your emotion. Because sometimes we just slap labels on things without giving it the full scope of thought
Right.
that it needs. So, I mean, if you do feel guilty, maybe you weren't as present as you thought you should have been when they were home, or you have a regret. You can't change the past, but you can use that information. And listen, we've all been guilty of that. And some of us have very high standards for ourselves as parents.
Yes.
And maybe that's just your expectation is just too high and you can never achieve it. So also give that some thought. But,
Right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynn. I'm Dr. Brooke.
I'm Dr. Lynn.
Thank you so much for joining.
That was my John Travolta, like Saturday Night Fever.
I know.
Intro.
What was that?
I don't know.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you here. We've got an interesting topic today.
Yes, we're talking about mom guilt. We're moms, so that sort of comes part and parcel. Guilt.
If we're not worrying,
we're guilty.
Feeling guilty.
We're feeling guilty. So, but we're talking about it because, it's just past Christmas and many of the kids were home for Christmas and go back. And we had a listener write in and ask about that. Is it normal to feel relieved when your kids leave home or to feel guilty? And what do you do with those feelings?
Yeah.
And you have a sort of a personal story to share. So it's kind of an appropriate time for us to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, well, listen, let's unpack it a little further because she was really the woman in our community that wrote in and asked about it was feeling, this is the thing, like a lot of angst over, like, she loved having her daughter home. It was a great time spent until it wasn't. And like, I think there was
like house guests and fish. What is that? They overstay their welcome.
I don't know.
Oh my gosh. You've never heard that?
Uh-uh.
House guests and fish, after 3 days, they start to smell.
Oh, I mean, that can be a tricky thing. And I think it can even apply obviously with kids, but yeah, she said that it was a mother-daughter, and even when she was still living in the home, they butt heads a lot, which is perfectly natural. I think it happens a lot with mothers and daughters, especially if you're super similar, but it can happen with moms and sons. Like, it doesn't matter. It can happen. But like, how do you reconcile those feelings, especially when so many moms around us, and even everything we do on social media is like, oh, I'm so sad they're gone. But then there is some of us that are like, yay, they're gone.
Woohoo, let the good times roll.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's okay. And by the way, I have a friend who said the same thing. She had an older daughter and a son who was the younger one. And when the daughter went, she said, honestly, like, it was the best thing that ever happened for our relationship. Because we just butted heads. We butted heads so hard when she was at home. And once she left, we both got away from each other. We could catch our breath. And it just made our relationship better in so many ways, because we weren't on top of each other all the time. We had the space we needed. It allowed us to appreciate our differences in a way, because she was getting older too. But she was like, but also, like, when she comes home, we both know when it's time for her to leave, and it's okay.
Yeah. Speaking as a daughter who once left her mom at home, it also has that benefit of you appreciate your parents so much. So when your kids leave home, even though, whatever the circumstances are, hopefully they are off realizing, oh, they're adulting and they're going, okay, like some of this is making sense.
Yeah.
Why they say and do and act the way, crazy parents do, right? I use air quotes with that, but it gives, at least it did for me, like major appreciation for my parents. And that is how that relationship can grow closer, because they leave home a kid and they come back an adult.
Right. And it's also that phrase, absence makes the heart grow
Yeah.
fonder. So, and the problem is when they're 13, 14, 15, really driving you nuts, 16, whatever that age, those teenage years, you can't get them. There are times you want to send them off to college and you can't.
And you can't. It's too
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
They're not cooked yet.
Yeah, but what is it about that? So, you said I had a personal story, and I don't want to throw any of my kids under the bus, but I had a situation where one of my kids ended up transferring schools, and because of the way the timing worked out, he had finished his first year of school. He couldn't go to the next school just because of timing in the fall semester. So he was at home for a semester, took some classes and worked, but he was living at home. And then just in the spring, for the spring semester, now went to school. And I think both of us were getting to a point where, like, it is time for you to go, like, because I don't think I feel guilty about that. So maybe that's your freedom if you're listening, or to the woman that wrote in, if you happen to listen, about feeling the guilt. Like, I don't think that makes you a bad mom or a bad person, or there's something wrong with you, or whatever you're telling yourself.
So let's talk about what guilt is. I mean, guilt is a useful emotion when you do something wrong. But I think that our culture, especially women, we're prone to feeling guilt when it's inappropriate,
Oh
right?
my
It's a
gosh.
useful guilt is, I have a regret. I feel guilty.
Yep.
So it's always helpful to examine if you truly sit with the emotion. Is guilt the right word? Or is it, I miss caretaking, right?
Yep.
Or I don't miss caretaking.
Right.
And think about really what is the right word for your emotion, because sometimes we just slap labels on things without giving it the full scope of thought that it needs. So, I mean, if you do feel guilty, maybe you weren't as present as you thought you should have been when they were home, or you have a regret. You can't change the past, but you can use that information. And listen, we've all been guilty of that. And some of us have very high standards for ourselves as parents.
Yes.
And maybe that's just your expectation is just too high and you can never achieve it. So also give that some thought. But,
Right.
is it truly that you're feeling guilty, or are you, is it just a normal, natural part of life? And like you said, you guys just had played that out. It was time. Right. And I think in the senior year too, like in our house, my daughter's a late bloomer, but we've talked about senior year, and they're almost preparing you for that, because for the first time, Lila, if you're listening, I love you, but she's not.
Also, we know you're not listening.
No, exactly.
So your secret's safe with us.
Yeah. So me and 10,000 of our friends, but so some of that has started happening. It's because they're like preparing themselves, and they're kind of preparing you for it. And hey, it's just, maybe it's just time, and it's okay. And let the feelings of guilt, or whatever they're called, go. Bask in the fact that, hey, they're living their life. They're happy. You get to be happy. Being a mom does not mean you have to suffer, right? Sometimes we kind of just like put ourselves through the ringer because we think that's how we should feel.
Right.
And we should be feeling guilty and, oh no, and that's not normal. Or maybe, making it seem like maybe you love your child less, right? But you don't. It's really not that. It's just a normal progression of life.
Right. Yeah, I think you have to, maybe, like, if you're in that situation and you're feeling this sense of you're feeling a sense of relief, or almost, maybe excitement's too strong of a word.
Well, what were you
your
feeling,
kids are
Dr.
leaving or have left, or they've been home and then they left again. And then you're feeling guilt over it. I think it's really helpful to unpack, well, why are you feeling that way? Like, not why are you feeling guilty, because we already know you're feeling guilty, but why are you feeling a sense of relief or excitement or whatever that is that they're going back to school. And that's a really helpful conversation to have, because in my case, a lot of that was because, let's face it, my son is a downright slob. And I was tired of, picking
Picking
up
up after
after.
him.
I like my house, in fairness to him. I'm like, kind of, you probably wouldn't call me hospital corners because I think you're even up a notch from me, but I like a clean house. I like everything in its place. And even if it's not my room, I could just shut the door and walk by. It still bothers me, and it weighs on my mental like focus, it just, all of it. That's just how I'm wired. And he doesn't deem that high an importance on his list.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a lot of it. And hey, that goes back to like, what can we control? And I guess we could say, yeah, I can control him because he's in my house. I could boot him or whatever. But like, only thing I can control is my own emotions. And by the way, that's on me because I could enforce it. I could enforce him, right? Stepping up and doing what he needs to do. That would probably make it a lot less of me feeling like relief of
Yeah.
him
I mean,
going.
it's never perfect. I mean, ideally, he would meet you a little bit in the middle and you would relax a little
Right.
bit. But, it just doesn't happen that
No.
way,
But
especially with young adults.
right. But I'm saying like it's helpful to look at that because in my case that's a more frivolous thing, but maybe there's something that's going on with you and your kid that needs to be addressed. If there's a lot of stress between you happening and you're looking forward to them going, that's where you might have to take a step back and go, is this something that I need to either just be okay with, or if you are feeling guilt around it, maybe it's because it's something that you need to unpack.
Yeah, like I love your point. You're saying basically like get to the root of that. Like
Well,
why
what
is
what
it you're
is
feeling guilt? I mean, sometimes I'm just thinking too. I mean, uh, I have two children, but they grew up separately because of the age difference. But a lot of people in with multiple kids that I have friends and so forth, and I observe, there are just some kids who are different than you, and you do butt heads more.
Yep.
Or it could be the opposite spectrum where they're so alike you that you kind of like all the parts about them that annoy yourself are the parts that you don't like about yourself. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like holding up a mirror to yourself. And
It's
sometimes
true.
you need a break from that. And so that could be where the guilt is coming from. I don't know if there's a solution to that, but just to say, like, having that awareness of, okay, we're so alike
Mm-hmm.
that we, once in a while, we need to take these
Yeah.
breaks and it's okay. And it's probably healthier for both of us. I would say that two, like, spouses are different. So, like, in terms of getting to the root cause, I'm not quite there yet, but I'm really close. And I'm thinking, I'm
Oh, what
not
are we
going to
doing
have
here?
guilt. But even now, on certain things, my husband will feel guilty.
Towards Lila or you?
Yes. But I chalk it up to he doesn't have as much time with her,
Oh,
right?
right.
So I think it can be different when they come home for Christmas and you're trying to pack all of this fun,
Yep.
happy, meaningful, quality conversations and time and into like a very short period of time to
Yes.
get it all in there. And it's just a matter of fact that it's just not going to happen,
Right.
right? You don't have enough time with them. And so maybe when they leave, you feel guilty.
Oh my gosh. So that's a whole different side of the guilt. That's different than, but it's appropriate to talk about in this conversation because I'm willing to bet that moms struggle more with that type of guilt. And I am notorious for that. Like, on the regular, I do that. And I can just tell you how many times that happened to me when they were home at Christmas because I work in the home now. So it's this sense of like, it's okay. Like many of us are working during the holiday, right? And especially with kids that come home to visit, if they're coming home from college, they could be home for a month at a time. You're not going to have a month off. But it's this weird push and pull of like, because I'm home, I feel like I should be spending time with them, but also I have to work. And by the way, that was part of the relief of them going back to school because I don't have like, it's quiet in the house again. And I'm not like working in the middle of something and somebody comes in. And of course, I'm going to drop everything because I don't get to see them that much. But I regularly beat myself up with, like, Brooke, you didn't, like, now he's gone and you had all those days where he was just sitting on the couch doing nothing that you could have like gone to lunch with him or taken him or done this or done that, And I even feel it happening in the moment. But at the end of the day, it's like Okay, A, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to is that really real feelings, like you're feeling guilty because you didn't take the time that you should have and you should put aside more quality time, or is it a case of like that's life, that's how you're living your life, you're busy, you have things to do, and if that's the case, like either do something about it or let it go. But
Yeah.
instead, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I'll let you go in a second. Let me just finish here. Instead, at least what I do is constantly beat myself up. It's like I if I was able to, it's the same thing with fear and worry. If you let go of that fear, the worry, or the guilt, it's almost like even though it is
What would you do?
what would
What
you
would you
do?
do if you let go of that?
Even
Right?
though it's
That's the
like self
problem.
punishment, it's still your comfort zone. It's like a warm hug to you
That's a
almost
really good
because you're so
awareness. I mean, that's an
used.
important self-awareness for you.
Well, and I think a lot of us do
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
And I had a really, really, really close person in my life point that out to me just during the holidays, and it almost like if I had not been sitting down, it probably would have brought me to my knees because I was like, oh, that's a real thing, and I didn't make the jump to guilt because we were talking about fear and worry, but guilt is a similar
Same.
thing.
They're sisters. They're siblings.
What's that?
They're siblings.
Who?
Guilt and worry.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a similar thing, and we do that. And I
Okay.
think Brene Brown
Okay. So
talks about this too.
that's like a self-check moment, what you just shared. Like that is I think that's got to be really helpful. I mean, I'm mentally going through and going, how much do I do that? And is that how you want to live your life?
Right.
And in the meantime, we have to unlearn some of the things. It's not as easy as just saying, "Okay, I'm not going to do that."
No,
These are habits that we form and you have to unlearn that,
absolutely.
right?
100%.
Um
That's a tricky thing. You do have to unlearn it. But again, as we talk about so much, very often the first step of that is being aware.
For sure. And listen, having a plan too, right? So talking about the Christmas and,
Yeah.
he sat on the couch and could I have taken him for lunch? I have had those times where you know something's coming up, whether it's a holiday or a vacation, and you have these pictures in your head that you don't really like pull down and like form them concretely, like
Yep.
make them into actual, like, we should do this, we should do that. So I think it's always good sense to actually have a loose plan going into a time of heightened, like you want to come out of that time with having spent meaningful, quality connected time
Yep.
with either your kids or friends or whoever it is. Like, for instance, at Christmas, we had one day with our son and his 4 kids that we were going to devote to celebrating the holiday specifically. We got to do some other fun things, which was great. But on this one day, they were coming over to our house. It's Christmas, so you've got all these big hopes and wishes. I had a list of 10 things, and I, in my head, thought we were getting it all done. At the end of the day,
And he's got little ones, so
and
that's
he's got
never
4
happening.
little ones, like 2, 4, 6, 8, that kind of thing. Well, actually, anyway, so they're a little older now. But we got out of the 10 things that I had, we got 2 things done. But when they left, I was sad about the things we didn't get to do and those memories we didn't get to create. But I think because I went into it in the day and I was like, okay, this is going to be meaningful. What we did was enough.
Yeah.
Like it was enough. So you have to kind of arrive at that place. But just my point is have a little plan. So for the summer, have a few goals. This is where our goals framework comes in, getting in that habit
Yeah.
of setting some things down, pulling it out from your brain, making it not so romanticized, but actually pulling it down on paper and saying, okay, once a week, I want to take my kid out to lunch over the summer. Hey, maybe you're not perfect on that. If there's, let's see, 12 weeks in the summer, maybe you make 9 of those, but is that not a win?
Yeah. It's huge.
Well, it wouldn't get done. My point is it wouldn't get done unless you said,
Yeah.
right? And then maybe just not pick too many things to where you're going to feel disappointed. Pick a few things that are important.
Sure.
If it's golf with your child, if it's whatever it is, that meaningful activity.
Well,
now I'm talking too much. So
no, you're good. But I do like that, but I think to privy that with don't plan to do too much when they're visiting. And this could be spring break. You might have adult kids that are, out of college altogether, but they still come back to visit. So this can apply to any situation where you're spending time with them, right? I would just say be careful you don't plan too much. We're all different. For you, that would be okay because you can let go of things. Like, but if I have a plan, me, like
This
I'm
is
sticking
true.
to
I
that
do know
plan
this about
and
you.
whatever I have to do. I might be exhausted at the end of the day, but if I said I'm going to do it, I'm damn well doing it. And I'm just going to fry myself or beat myself up because I didn't do it. So like, give yourself some grace and maybe don't go overboard with the planning if you have a mind that works like mine. We don't all work that way. But also, I've done this and I didn't realize I put it on my goals framework for this year because here's the thing. And we talked about this on this last podcast about how can you take something that you're struggling with and turn it around to something good. And so I was feeling that guilt with Andrew, right? That he was sitting here during Christmas and I didn't like all the things we could have. And by the way, we did a lot of things. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not like I didn't see him at all.
Yeah.
We did a ton of things with him. But it's always like it could have been better. That's the problem, right? When the guilt hits, it's like, but it could have been, you can't just necessarily be grateful for what you did have. You want to say like, but all these ways it could have been better. But
yeah,
anyway,
that's a you thing for sure. I think that's if we're doing that, if we're sitting in our seat and we're like nodding, that's definitely on us. Like the kids don't notice that.
No,
right?
Absolutely. That's on us. Like be happy with what the time that you did had too, by the way, if you're feeling guilty. But what I was going to say with the goals framework is I took a step back from that and I'm like, okay, Brooke, you've got to let that go because you're not getting the time back. You can do better moving forward, if that's the case, if that really is real, if it's not just a case of you like self-punishing, but if it is a case that you could have spent more time and didn't, do better the next time. But also I'm looking at my youngest who I still have a couple years with in the home, and on my goals framework, and we started, is Monday nights we have family dinner because he's doing sports. My husband travels a lot for work, or he has late meetings. So for us to be able to sit down as a family every night, that doesn't happen. It's it's a luxury. So and he's on his games. Like it's just life happens, and I can sometimes work through. Like it's difficult. So I was like, Monday nights we're going and we go out. We're going out to dinner Monday nights, and nobody's bringing a phone.
Ooh,
or if you have your phone, you're not bringing it to the dinner table.
I love that.
So like all of us. And then if there's a case where Ken's like this week, Ken traveled, so it was Sunday night. But that's a way for me to check myself and like, at least there's that. As busy as we all get, and I might be working, AJ comes home from school, I don't see him, but at least I know that once a week we're connecting with him for an hour and a half or more and talking through what's coming up for the week, what happened the week before. So, if you are feeling that guilt and it is sound guilt, like something that's warning you of something that maybe needs to change, well, then what can you do to make it better? Because just stewing on it and feeling bad isn't gonna do anything. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I think the bigger issue here is just that, like, why are you feeling the guilt? And maybe it's completely unnecessary, but especially if you can't really pinpoint something you did wrong.
Right.
You could just be doing it just to say, do more, do better. Like that whole, like, it's never enough, you're not enough, that whole conversation. And you are, and give yourself, it's time to work on that. If that's you, it's time to get to that place where you look at it and you say, it is enough. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yep.
Don't rest on your laurels, but look at your gains. Yeah.
Oh.
Rest on your laurels. Is that Canadian?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have to. I'm not.
What would you say? Don't rest on your.
I don't know. No, it's interesting because I love new words. Like I look, like if I'm reading something and I see a new word,
if you're
I'll
out
look
there
it up
listening,
in the dictionary. That's cool.
Google that and check me. Make sure it's actually a word. I'm pretty sure I've heard that before. Could be a Canadian saying.
I don't know. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
Like, and now I forget what I was saying. That's okay.
Rest on your laurels.
Don't rest on your laurels.
Don't rest on your laurels.
But like check in with your gains. It's not about like, okay, I'm here, I did this much, but here's what I didn't get done.
Mm-hmm.
It's here. Look, we did this much and this is better. This is good.
Yeah.
This is a good thing. It's the gap in the gain.
Right. And we talk about that in the book too. We have a whole chapter on that and I could have done that. And I did do that to some extent when I was feeling the guilt of when Andrew went back to school. And some of it I think is just like you're sad because they're going and you're like, oh, I just want a little
There's
more time. I
never
could have done
enough
this.
time.
I could have done that.
And you can never do enough things. I think it's just some of it is just you're gonna feel that way.
But to your point, it's like I could sit there all day long and think of all the things I could have done, or I could take a step back too and go, Babbitt, look at all the stuff we did do and how great it was. We went to see this movie, we went to see together. We had an awesome dinner before. We went to a couple Bruins games. We had his friends came to Florida with us for New Year's, and we spent New Year's Eve and like 4 awesome days with them. His best friend, there were so many things. But no, I don't. I'm sure many of you don't focus on that. It's all but I didn't do this. And why do we do that? It's just silly.
Don't
that
do
we
that.
do that to ourselves. And I'm speaking to myself when I say that. And I just want to circle back one more time as we wrap up to the original conversation, which was feeling guilty.
Imagine that we got off on a tangent.
I know. Well, but it's all mom guilt. But the aspect of guilt of feeling guilty if you're feeling a sense of relief because they go back. And you brought this up, and it's just so important, I think, to make mention of again, is that the older the kids get, they're coming into themselves too, and they're becoming adults. And we may have personalities that butt heads a little bit, or to your point, we might be very similar. And that doesn't make you a bad mom or a bad person. And it doesn't mean you have to like bend over backwards and put your own needs aside. Like that's a tricky thing, right? It's a tricky thing to walk through.
Right.
That.
It's what I said earlier. It doesn't mean you love them less. I mean, sometimes our kids are little assholes. Like, can I say that? Right. And you don't need to love that. You love them. You don't love how they're acting. And it's normal and it's natural for them to leave too. So give yourself a freaking break, I guess. You know, if that is you and you're feeling that, you have permission. You have permission from Dr. Lynn to give yourself a break.
Yeah. And I think just us just talking about this and maybe another mom hearing it and saying, okay, I'm not the only one.
That's the whole point.
You know, like it's okay. Like we've all been there. I think we've all been there. So like if you were the mom that was listening or you're the one that wrote in, give yourself a little bit of a break, as Dr. Lynn said, because we have all, don't
punish yourself. Don't punish yourself. Like, I think that's what we do. We tend to do that. And that's a female thing. Maybe there are men out there who struggle with that too, but I definitely see it as a recurring theme for females. It's like we punish ourselves for not doing enough, being enough, all of that. It's time to stop that. I'm not going to call it nonsense. It's not, because we all do it to a certain extent. But can we agree to not do that to ourselves? Just that one thing. Just let it go. It's okay. You're good. They're good, right? And again, we're talking about healthy situations. You might feel guilty. There's a difference between guilt and regret. If you did something wrong, you should feel guilty. If you let them down, if you're not making good choices as a mom, if you're listening to this too, and there's some things like you're choosing over your kids, and then that's when guilt is appropriate.
Yeah, it's not a free pass.
It's not a free pass. We're talking about moms who are mostly in a healthy space, but listen, this is a big community and we have a lot of differences and we're all in different spaces. We can hold, grace for everybody where they're at. But if you need also that pep talk of like, okay, well, the guilt is there to remind you can do a little better. If you don't like that feeling, and there is something that you wish you could have changed. So notice the difference between self-punishment and actually having real regret.
Right.
And do what you need to do about that.
Yeah, because sometimes guilt is there for a reason.
That's just it. Is the guilt appropriate?
Yes. And it's the same thing going back to fear and worry. Not worry, but fear. Sometimes fear is appropriate because it's protecting you from something you shouldn't do. And guilt is sometimes appropriate because it's pointing out to you that you need to change your ways or whatever. There is something there that you should not have done. So it's finding the discernment. And if you can't find the discernment for yourself, that's where you might need to get quiet in prayer. If that's what you do, that's what I do often. But also go to somebody that you really trust, that can help you through that too, because sometimes we can't get there on our own.
Sometimes we need others. And
Yep.
so this is a great starter conversation. I think we gave you some questions to ask, some check in. And, if you're an outwardly processing person, have a sounding board,
Yep.
find a friend, call us up. We love to answer those questions. We've had people explain in length their circumstance and ask our opinion. We're happy to help, however we can, or go to someone who knows you closely and can help.
Right.
If you're an inward processing person, just make sure you don't run away from those feelings. Sit with them, look at them, trying to do that objectively, and then just decide how you're going to change moving forward.
Right.
Yep.
Just be careful that you don't. We can also have the tendency to go to ask for advice from the people who we know are going to give us the things we want to hear. And it might be the wrong thing. Like they're going to like puff us up and ease our mind and say, oh, you are absolutely in the right. Like you have to be
that's
careful.
A whole nother podcast episode, because the people that tell us straight and direct are so few and far between. And honestly, we punish them because we don't like whatever they're saying to us. Because I'm kind of a direct person.
Yeah.
Not always, unless if you have given me the indication that you can handle my directness, you're going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if I care about you.
Yeah.
If you're someone who's sort of on my outer circle, well, I'm not going to go to that length.
Right.
To tell you what I really think. I'm just going to tell you we're just acquaintances, or we haven't reached that emotional depth.
Yep.
Right. But my point is, those people that will tell you things straight are actually very rare in your life. So make sure if you don't like what they're telling you,
there's more discernment. We could go on and on.
That's a whole separate topic. Let's stop there.
Yeah. Actually, I'm thinking we need to address that because I've had this come up in my life. Okay, ladies, we're wrapping because we're going to go on all day. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. And we hope you're going to give yourself a break when needed moving forward. Make sure you're following us on all of our feeds: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, if you prefer to watch over listen. And head to www.lifeafterkids.com for all of our free resources and our blog. And I hope you have a great day and an even better week.
Thanks so much for being here, and just hugs to you.